welcome to another exciting version of Chip Talks. Today we're going to talk about, are they really out to get us? Not to be too conspiratorial, but are they really out to get us? I wonder this all the time. I wonder this just by observation, the things that I observe in our society. And let's say the things that I observe that the powers that be are trying to foist upon us. And most of this observation has to do with really just our lack of understanding and our lack of knowledge. And without lack of understanding and lack of knowledge, we're pretty susceptible to herd behavior. Like if everyone else is doing it, then I'm going to do it. So let's talk this through a little bit. And these will result in, let's say, health tips that you can use to greatly improve your overall health function. So most of us right now are suffering from chronic inflammation. That chronic inflammation is most likely caused by some kind of pathogen, but there are things in our environment that weaken us to be infected. So in a perfect world, we would never be infected. We would have a strong immune system. We would understand how to work our immune system, and we would exercise that daily, and we wouldn't really suffer from the things that we suffer with. But with no education about our immune system, how many of you guys know how to work your immune system? Raise your hands. Yeah, that's what I thought. Not unless you've been listening to this show, and unless you've heard me, on almost every single episode talk about how to work your immune system, then you likely don't know how to work your immune system. But again, intermittent fasting is probably the biggest tip that I could ever give you as to how to work your immune system. So intermittent fast, intermittent fast, intermittent fast. When we eat, and for 5 hours after we eat, we go into low gear and we're way weaker. But there's many things in our environment that also weaken us. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about those things and just some observations that I had. I'm sure you guys will have a lot more observations than I do. An obvious one is just fluoride in the water, right? So why do that? I mean, fluoride has some evidence at helping your teeth, but there's a lot of other things that I could educate you about that'll help your teeth a lot more, like just care and bacteria and what you can do to prevent bacteria in your mouth, right? So there's lots of disinfectants and things that we could be using in our mouths. And fluoride is something that hurts our, pineal gland. And arguably that is our, link to higher consciousness. So we may or may not want to harm that guy, right? But anyway, a lot of things in our society are really look to me to be almost traps for the ignorant, right? And most of us are ignorant, so most of us fall right into this trap. And I don't mean any offense by ignorance. I just mean lack of knowledge, okay? So let's start with omega-3, omega-6. And you'll hear me talk almost in every episode of Chip Talks podcast about omega-3 and omega-6 balance. They're the two most important foods that we eat every day. The criticality of your understanding omega-3 and omega-6 and their balance and their role in your health and immune system just can't be overstated. It's so important that you understand this information. It's almost a national emergency at this point, I would say, that we all understand omega-3 and omega-6 balance. It's what is causing autoimmunes. It's what is, let's say, allowing our immune system to be configured in a way where we are very weak and very susceptible to infection. And when we do get infected, we don't mitigate it well. We inflame and react rather than sort of deflame and heal. And that's not a good situation, but it's all driven by omega-3 and omega-6 fats. So let me tell you a little bit about why this is happening now and what has happened in our overall food supply and kind of why this has happened, let's say, in a generation, because we've all become obese and we've all become diseased really in a generation, right? So when I was growing up, people weren't obese. We maybe had, one person who was mildly overweight in my entire, class growing up. We didn't have the problems that we have right now, right? And if you go back to pictures of the 1900s, things like that, you don't see many big people. You see a lot of thin people. You see a lot of people wearing hats, which is kind of interesting. But we'll talk about that on another show. But anyway, you don't see very many big people, right? And if you take a picture right now of just any random shot of, the United States of America and people, you're going to see almost half of the people, let's say, in that shot are overweight. And the reason for that, really, there's a lot of reasons why we gain weight. Your gut biome is part of it. There's a lot of reason, craving, overgrowth of firmicutes bacteria in your biome. So there's a lot of reasons, let's say, why we get configured into weight gaining. But the underlying reason is omega-3 and omega-6 balance. All of those things that I just said can be tied back to a lack of omega-3 or an overabundance of omega-6, which is what we have in our diet. Now, but let me walk you through how insidious this is, because, where were people getting omega-3 and omega-6 in the early 1900s when we were skinny? Where were they getting them in the 1850s when we were obese and we weren't dying of all these diseases? How were they balancing omega-3 and omega-6 fats? We didn't know anything about them then. They weren't researched. And in fact, omega-3, omega-6 fats are really just started to come into awareness through the work of Dr. Artemis Simopoulos, who I will have on my show soon. She's an awesome lady and very excited to have her and do an interview with her soon. But she really started the whole omega-3, omega-6 disbalance and look at everything. But anyway, why were people skinny back in the day and we're not now? Well, our meat. And if you look at what our meat used to do, our meat used to graze on grass. And the work of Dr. Artemis Simopoulos is really interesting. She started her work with chickens. And she noticed that chickens in Greece, their eggs had almost a perfect balance, 1-to-1 of omega-3 and omega-6. She came back here to the United States. She was all excited. She wanted to, write papers about this. The egg, the superfood, it's the perfect balance of omega-3, omega-6. And she started analyzing eggs here, and they were not perfectly balanced. They were way over ratioed with omega-6. And so they began to figure out that the chickens in Greece were eating parsley. Okay, so they were eating parsley, which is natural green. And any natural leafy green plant is going to have a lot of omega-3 in it, or some omega-3 in it. And so these chickens were eating the parsley, and so they were eating omega-3, and that omega-3 was imbuing in both their meat and their eggs. When she came over here to the United States and looked at chickens here in the United States, these chickens were eating corn. Corn is a high source of omega-6 with hardly any omega-3. And so, again, that was imbued in these chickens' meat and also in their eggs, and why their eggs were dysratioed. So when we had our cattle, when we had our pigs, when we had our sheep, when we had our chickens, all free ranging, they were eating natural grass. And as a result, those omega-3 fatty acids that are in grasses and things were imbued in their meat. In the 60s, 70s, 50s, we started changing all this. We started having giant feedlots for our beef, bring the cows in, feed them a bunch of corn to fatten them up. And guess what that does? Again, food is imbued in the meat. The meat is only as good as what that meat ate. And if that meat is eating crap, if that meat is eating a bunch of omega-6 fats and no omega-3 fats, that will be imbued in the meat. And so right now, we have no source of omega-3s in our diet. In fact, most people don't even know about omega-3 and omega-6 disbalance and the importance of it. And this is why I think it's a national emergency. I think Dr. Simopoulos and I are raising the flag that this is a national emergency, that we need to immediately do something about this, either by presidential commission or something like that. That's how important this is. But again, if you look at what's happening, it's happening through our food supply. And cows don't eat grass anymore. Some of us are going back to grass-fed beef. And again, that's better. Make sure it's grass finished. You don't want it finished with a bunch of corn because, again, that goes into the meat. All right, omega-3, omega-6. Again, all of that meat that used to be a big vitamin is now potentially, going to lead you to metabolic syndrome, autoimmunes, and a bunch of other wonderful things. If you're diligent and if you take this information, new knowledge, right? I'm not going to be ignorant anymore about the meat that I'm buying. I'm going to make smart decisions. You're going to go find a local farmer or somebody who or go to the farmer's market, because in every farmer's market right now, there's people selling, naturally raised beef, naturally raised chickens, naturally raised pork, and naturally raised eggs. Okay. So, and that's pretty important that we find those sources. If you go to your local grocer, again, you can almost be assured that meat is coming from feedlot type sources and is likely going to be really heavy in omega-6. And unless you offset with omega-3, so get a bunch of chia seeds and eat those every day, you're going to be disbalanced and your health will suffer as a result of this. Okay, so what else is going on? What other, let's say, areas of ignorance can we identify where we're not being taught proper information about how to defend ourselves and about kind of how we work? And by the way, my wife and I have built it's called an operations manual for humans. It's kind of a dummies book. Do you remember those old dummies? Windows 96 for dummies, right? So it's kind of an endocannabinoid system for dummies book. And you can download that on our website. So truemedics.com, TRUEMEDX.com. And a lot of this stuff is in there, although I'm going a little deeper in this podcast than what's in the book. But the book is a good primer, let's say, on how to work your body, on how to work your immune system, on what's good to do, what's bad to do, what hurts you, what helps you, that type stuff. So it's very, very, very good for that type of information. Okay, so let's move on to something else, and that's vitamins. So we're all taught about vitamins. Vitamins are really important. Why? Why are vitamins important? Okay, they're really important. Take your vitamins. Here's this horrible tasting pill when you're a child, so you're forever burned on vitamins. I was a Flintstone guy, though. I used to like those. I'd eat about 8 Flintstone vitamins at a time, which was probably not good for me. But vitamins are something that are very important. And I'm not going to go through every vitamin, but I'm just going to go through some bigger picture stuff on vitamins. So first of all, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K are all fat soluble. What does that mean? Well, it means that you'll store vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. Okay, so you'll store them in your phospholipids, you'll store them in your cell walls, so you'll store those vitamins. And it doesn't mean that you don't need them all the time. You do, because you have a turnover. Your body uses those vitamins. But at the same time, you don't need them every day. They're not critical every day. If you look at vitamins that are water soluble, those vitamins can't really be stored well by your body. So generally within 48 hours, pretty much anything that's circulating in you will get out of you. So these vitamins are only going to last about 48 hours, your B's and C's. Now, what do B's and C's do? Well, A's pretty much are your connection to light, okay? So A's are how our eyes work, and they're basically how our communication with the sun works and how our circadian rhythms work. So A's are really important in our body, and A's kind of help our body stay in sync and everything kind of do what it's supposed to do at the right time of day and not get in the way of other processes. Okay, so A is super important. D is our, kind of immune system vitamin. It's built from cholesterol, super important in our bodies. It's built from actually our interaction with the sun. Just a quick fact. And again, I believe you work like a mammal. I believe mammals are a good way to study you, but I don't think you are a mammal. You are something different. Your dog can make vitamin D in Alaska. You can't. And that is enough of a fundamental difference to classify you outside of a mammal. All right. And there's a bunch of other interesting stuff there. And again, we'll do a whole new show about that later after we lay down on this foundation. Okay, so D, super important. E obviously is very important, helps our skin and stay hydrated. It helps everything in us sort of stay hydrated. And it's also a very good antioxidant, meaning that it deals with oxidative stress. And K, I'm not really sure what K does, to be honest with you. So I'll have to study K. We may do a whole show about K, but K is important, and it's an important part of how we work. Now, B's and C's, though, B's and C's are super duper important. And B's really have to do with how a cell works. So without B vitamins, a cell is not going to work very well. He's going to be wonky, and he's not just going to perform his processes well. C's are what protect us from oxidative stress. So let's say a cell doesn't have enough B's and he's getting wonky, what he's going to start doing is leaking electrons. Those electrons can bind to other things and cause reactive oxygen species, which are not fun and you don't want. And vitamin C helps us get rid of those. The more inflammation that you have, the more reactive oxygen species you have. And again, the more tweaky your whole immune system is. So we don't want those. We want those mitigated. So B's and C's are super important that you have every single day. And you're going to go, well, Chip, it says on my cereal it's fortified with vitamin B's. Yeah, but, again, are they the right ones? So, niacin is pretty important. That's how it ends up, niacin builds something called NAD+, which is how you move electrons around in your body in your electron transport chain. Super important cofactor in a bunch of stuff. And again, without niacin, you don't build NAD+, and you can't move electrons. You're going to leak them and have a lot more oxidative stress. So this is another area where we seem to be severely undereducated about the importance of these things and just kind of left, naked and afraid. Oh yeah, take your vitamins. And even when you get it was really interesting. I decided to make a vitamin. So in True Medics, we've got a multivitamin. It is a complete multivitamin. It has, in fact, more than the RDA of every single vitamin in it. That is interesting, right? Just creating that vitamin. But as I was creating that vitamin, what I realized is that a lot of the B's are kind of gone, right? So there's B1, 2, and 3, and I believe then B5, 6, 7. But what happened to 4? And then there's some other interesting differences, like B17 is something called amygdalin or Laetrile, which has had great success in some cancer studies, cancer trials. There was a whole clinic in Dallas at one time that was just doing nothing but B17 injections for cancer and was quite successful. So for some reason, B17 has been pulled from the B's. You can't even buy it. So I can't put that in my multivitamin, sadly. But anyway, I've got a really good multivitamin out there if you're interested. So truemedics.com, TRUEMEDX.com, and look for our multivitamin. So vitamins, super important. Your cells won't work without B's and C's properly. You'll leak electrons. You'll have more need for C. If you don't have B's, right? So we need B's and C's, and they kind of go together. And they're water-soluble, which just adds to their importance that you have them every day, or at least be aware of where you're getting them every day. Leafy greens have some B's, fruits have some B's, fruits and vegetables have some B's and C's, and probably the best source. But unless you're really good at math and really good at cooking and handling your diet, I would suggest you supplement at least with B's and C's. Get you a really good supplement B and a good C, or just get our multivitamin. All right, so let's talk about some other things that are in our environment that are hurting us. And so processed sugar is a big one. Most of us are beginning to realize this. So most of us are beginning to get hip to this. So I'll just kind of give you a couple of analogies here, and then we'll move on to the next thing. But we all know, so most of us know, let's say that in Peru, people in Peru forever, since there have been people in Peru, have been picking coca leaves, so leaves from the coca plant, and chewing them. Why? Because it gives them a little bit of energy. It gives them a mood uplift, and it's, helps them. It's like drinking a cup of coffee, I guess, for us, right? So, but they've done this part of their culture forever and ever. Really no problems with it. No addiction with, people chewing too many, like coffee, right? So it's, would be hard to get addicted to in the first place. But if I take those coca leaves and I refine them down and I process out the cocaine from those coca leaves, now I've got something that is a very harmful, dangerous, and addictive chemical, whereas in its natural state, it wasn't, right? Well, guess what? Sugar in a sugar beet or sugar cane is not so bad. It's a natural product. You've got stops and measures in your body to kind of understand, okay, well, that's a natural product. Refined sugar is like cocaine. It is addictive and it is too much for your body. Your body doesn't understand how in the world that you could ever have that much sugar in one dose, because it's used to, I'll get a little bit of glucose from this fruit. I'll get a little bit of glucose from these vegetables. It's not used to a giant blast of processed sugar. And our bodies just didn't know how to handle it. So we begin to shut down. We begin to lose our, let's say, glucose sensitivity, which is, diabetes, lose our insulin resistance and all that. So anyway, that's what happens with processed sugar. And processed sugar also promotes a type of gut bacteria that will continue to demand processed sugar. So if you have uncontrollable cravings for processed sugar or gluten kind of works the same way, then you likely have a gut biome overgrowth of Firmicutes bacteria. Okay, so, and again, processed sugar is a huge thing for us. It's hurting our kids. It's, that it's going to be something that I don't need to talk much about in this podcast, because we're all going to be learning a lot about processed sugar and its bad, elements and everything that's kind of wrong with it, because that's kind of a top awareness thing right now. And I know HHS is going to be working very actively on processed sugar. The next thing I want to talk about is high fructose corn syrup. So we've all seen stuff about high fructose corn syrup now, and corn. And again, this goes back to the omega-3, omega-6 argument, because corn is heavy in omega-6s. And also goes back to the processed sugar, because high fructose corn syrup whacks you out in the same way that processed sugar does. Our bodies, again, naturally, just think about this. Our bodies are really built to eat fruit how many times during the year and for how long? Maybe 2 weeks in the fall, when the apples drop, right? And we're built to eat a bunch of apples at that time, and then, not for the rest of the time, because we used to never have a way to store apples. We didn't have a way to store fruit. We didn't, fruit will spoil, over time. So we didn't have a way to deal with fruit. Well, what we've now done is a similar thing with sugar. So we've taken what's sweet and interesting in fruit, high fructose corn syrup, and we pulled that out in corn. It's mainly in corn. It's not in fruit, but there's a little bit in fruit. Fructose is in fruit, okay? And fructose is really the thing that jumps our Krebs cycle, and the thing that is pretty dang dangerous in oversupply. So if you're eating fructose 2 weeks out of the year, and only a little bit, then again, great. It's, not bad for you at all. And it kind of helps things. But if you're eating fructose in a high volume every day, then it's not going to help you. It's going to hurt you. So high fructose corn syrup is another thing that is, let's say, not helping us, and something that you need to be aware of, and be aware, if you're going to eat it, fine. Just make sure that you're eating it, and make sure that you're making a conscious decision to eat it, even though it's really going to hurt your health. Okay. It's in everything too. So start reading labels. It's in ketchup, it's in mayonnaise, it's in frickin' everything. All right. But you can now find choices that don't have it in it, which is nice. So there are ketchups that don't have high fructose corn. In fact, I think Heinz even makes a ketchup that does not have high fructose corn syrup. But you got to read the labels. You got to read the labels. And really, in all this, you've got to defend clearly whoever we trust to defend us with this information, whoever we trust to keep us safe, the government, whoever, is not doing that. They are not doing their job. They are allowing many, many unsafe things to penetrate our food supply and our food system. So it's up to you right now. So read the labels, make sure you're not getting high fructose corn syrup. This last thing is kind of insidious. This could be my mistake, but it's kind of hard for me to believe that. But it's really interesting. So again, it seems like all of these little things just kind of, and omega-3, omega-6 is a giant thing, but all of these things erode our immune system and erode our ability to defend ourselves. So we're all going to get sick if we stay naked and afraid. We're all going to get infected with something. We're going to get hook around a pinworm. We're going to get pylori, and we're all going to get sick. And again, where are we going to turn when we're sick? And you might get those people as, part of the problem. Big food, big pharma are definitely part of the problem here. But now we're going to go to something else, big cosmetics. Okay. Now, your body is like a battery. And we all know, we've all seen, let's say, a AA battery. And a AA battery has to be insulated to keep basically those electrons inside and keep them configured in a certain way and keep them moving in a certain direction or with a certain order. But the big thing is to keep them inside, because again, if electrons leak, that's not going to be a very effective battery. It's not going to last very long. It's not going to produce much energy. So you are like a battery. All right. And again, there's lots that we could talk about that. That's a huge concept. I probably will do another podcast about that whole concept. But the important thing right now, and for kind of things that we're doing to damage ourselves, is this conversation. So in order for a battery to be effective, it has to have insulating material to keep the electrons in. What is your insulating material? Well, it certainly is your skin, but it's also the barrier oils on your skin. So your skin has to move electrons. So it has to be, let's say, electron permeable to some degree, and it has to be able to deal with and move electrons around. So it is not a proper barrier. The barrier that most of us have that holds electrons in is our skin oil. And our skin oil is what also attracts, let's say, dirt and detritus, and bacteria can get in our skin oil and begin to decompose our skin oil. So it's kind of why we stink and why we get dirty, is because our skin oil gets kind of gumped up. And so we use soap to take off our skin oil along with the dirt and whatever else might be stuck to our skin oil. When we do that, we do two things. We remove our insulation. So you're removing your insulation when you wash. Okay. So you're going to be leaking electrons and you're going to be hurting yourself in kind of a small way. And the other thing that you do is you change your pH. So skin has a more acidic pH, and most soaps have a more neutral or basic pH, and that's not good. Anytime you create, let's say, anytime you have a membrane and you have sort of, let's say, you can think of this as a dam. So if you put a dam in a flowing river, that river is going to begin to back up against that dam, and you're going to create a lot of potential between one side of the dam and the other side of the dam. Meaning if I put a small hole in the dam, I'm going to get a whole lot of water shooting through that hole with a whole lot of power. So I've created a potential situation. That's exactly what happens in a battery, like a 9-volt battery. 9 volts is just a measure of kind of what that dam is holding back, let's say electrically. 12 volts, it's holding back a little more. So you're the same way in your skin, and your skin and that oil maintains basically that barrier between outside and inside. and you're a little electronegative, in your barrier. But anyway, when we remove that barrier, we basically create a situation where soap is higher in pH than our skin, and that's going to create a potential that's going to suck electrons out of you. Okay. So soap and skin products that have, let's say, a 7, we want to look for things with a 5, 5.5, 6, somewhere in there. That's about the pH of our skin. When we're bathing and washing with things that are a 7, again, that's going to aggravate this problem of washing off our barrier oil. So how do we do this? How should we do this? It's looking like there's a lot of oils that are astringent, meaning that an oil will sort of help clean up another oil. And it's looking like we need to potentially, first of all, apply these other oils, these astringent oils, and then potentially wash those off. So just a thought, but that's kind of where my mind's going. But we need to rectify this problem is the big thing, because all of these, well, omega-3, omega-6 is a big problem. You not getting enough B vitamins and C vitamins is a big problem. You eating processed sugar is a big problem. You eating high fructose corn syrup is a big problem. This soap and skincare is not as big of a problem, but it is a subtle problem that hurts you. Air fresheners hurt you, right? They tweak your ACH, your acetylcholine, and nicotinamide channels. They're just not things that we should have around us. We should really be a lot more aware, and I'm shooting on us all, am I? So we could be, and we need to be a lot more aware of our environment. We need to be a lot more aware of the way that we work, and we need to understand things that hurt and help us in our environment. But I just find it interesting why aren't there a bunch of stuff in our environment that helps us? Why aren't there all these, oh, well, yeah, here's a company that balances omega-3, omega-6, and, they're very successful because of how they help people with health. Here's a company that's decided to move away from processed sugar and into more natural sugar substances that, having great success. And now they're doing cereal and, beverages and all kinds of stuff. Those aren't the companies that succeed in our society. They're companies like Coke and Pepsi. And if you're not seeing, after the processed sugar discussion, the high fructose discussion, if you're not seeing the, evil there, then, perhaps you need to. I don't know how else to open up your eyes, because these companies are not trying to help you. If they were trying to help you, they would be coming out with products that help us, not hurt us. All right, we'll leave it there for right now. So join us next week for another. Thank you for tuning in to Chip Talks Health, where we uncover the truth so your body can do what it was designed to do, and that's heal. If today's episode helped you think differently about your health, give us a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Want to go deeper? Visit TrueMedics.com to explore science-backed solutions, or book a bioresonance scan at Neighborly Wellness to find out the root cause of what's holding you back. Until next time, stay curious, stay well, and keep listening to your body.